Welcome to my house. I'm going to watch a Doctor Who story nominated by a friend of mine. I've asked them to tell me what it is they love about it, and I have to guess what their favourite things are. Well, welcome to Hadoke Towers. I'm going to slightly alter the way I'm doing these in order to save me a bit of time in the shoddy booth in which I record and put these things together for your digestion. So I'm doing the introduction as part of my watching of the episodes, so I don't have to do a special extra sort of recording session. You don't need to know the mechanics. I'm just trying to make this easier because it's taking up an awful lot of my time, and I've just spent half an hour wrestling with. I understand the iPhone is a marvelous piece of technology, but it's just irritated the hell out of me, and I want to smash it to pieces. But nonetheless, I'm instead using it to film me and do all the other clever things it can do. Doesn't mean I can't get annoyed with it. So I know there's a running theme of me getting annoyed with technology, so it might be me at fault and not the technology, but I'm clinging on to the illusion that it's its fault and not mine. So what we're going to do to introduce our story is to meet our special guest, who is going to introduce himself, I hope, and to tell me for the first time. I know, obviously, because he's let me know what story he's chosen, and now he's going to enunciate a vague outline of why, and then we'll get down to business.
I have chosen the Ribos Operation. The Ribos Operation is not on many people's top 10 lists. In fact, I've seen it on some people's worst 10 Doctor Who's, but they are wrong. It's one of the great stories of the classic era. It's definitely in my top 10. There are probably more action-packed stories. There are certainly better monster stories. This isn't much of a monster story, but this is so enjoyable. It's so intricate. It's so rewarding. I love this. I love this story passionately.
He's edited it rather beautifully. He's given a fade to black in between bits, which means I don't have to guess when he's stopped talking. He didn't introduce himself. He is Dan Rebellato. He is a very clever man, a gifted playwright, has written many plays for radio and for the stage. Very smart cookie. I might talk about how Dan and I first encountered each other. He's just stopped tweeting "Night night, you disgusting halfwit" to Donald Trump, which he has done, I think, pretty much every night of his presidency. But Dan's a very entertaining, very smart fella. And he's a writer. So I'm slightly unsurprised that it was him that has chosen. Well, I'm going to talk over the episode because I'm going to press play. We're going to press play and I'll get into this. Press play in 3, 2, 1. And don't worry, it has started. I just don't have the sound turned up because there we go. So we're watching the Ribos Operation. I might sometimes by accident call it the Ribos Operation because that was what I first knew it as when I saw the book in the Castle bookshop in Castle Square in Ludlow. I'm assuming I bought it then. The cover is unlike any other cover. It's a cover by John Geary, and it's this sort of slightly mottled thing with a Shrievenzale looking all sort of reptilian. It actually looks like it scooped up its own feces and is having a munch on them, the way that its claw is. But I'm not sure I read the book for ages. I don't know if Ian Marter and the Ribos Operation is I can't actually remember much about the book at all. I think I remember the death of one of the characters having their side blown out, whereas this I predominantly know of because of its glorious humour. Although I love the lighting and this darkness, this is a fantastic opening. I think of this as a sort of frivolous and fun story, but this is a really epic beginning, and I love that lighting, and I love the TARDIS fading to black. Now, Tom Baker's Doctor has this insouciance about him that I think in the ensuing scene, is slightly flippant. And Doctor Who has always sort of destroyed its gods and monsters, sometimes by undermining their pomposity. But you still do need Dudley Simpson's giving us the organ stuff. So for the start of an Umbrella season, which I remember some of this season, I think from repeats, but I wasn't aware really of the linking thing until, I went back to learn about the history of Doctor Who. So although I had memories of Pirate Planet, I think only Pirate Planet really, which I think was a repeat. I don't think the Key to Time thing had quite registered with me. I was a little too young. 1978, I was 4. Cyril Luckham and the White, and so reading about the history of Doctor Who, the White Guardian, and the way that the White and the Black Guardian came into the Peter Davison era as though they were great figures from the past. What one didn't actually realise until much, much later is the White Guardian and the Black Guardian are both in about 5 minutes of one episode. The way that it was sort of written up, you assumed they were these sort of towering monoliths who cast a shadow over the whole season, and they sort of don't. I kind of like that. I mean, this is... I remember Tom Baker on the Tom Baker Years video, VHS, which is a thing of beauty if you've never seen it. I would seek it out. Unlike the other Years tapes, it's Tom reacting spontaneously to clips. And they show him this bit, which I think is not a great way to remember the Ribos Operation, but he does describe it as sort of 2 old sweats, working hard, because it's sort of exposition, but it's exposition with character, with lots of good jokes. I think Baker's insolence is matched with a great efficiency and quiet power by Cyril Luckham, and that Nothing Will Happen to You Ever is an absolutely fantastic threat. And he looks great, doesn't he? And I think that's a very Doctor Who-y thing to do, is to have an all-powerful alien looking like a sort of an old gent on a veranda, having what looks like a creme de menthe with a buttonhole. Bringing down, making its all-powerful things, work within a budget, but also it makes it sort of work timelessly. I love the fact that the Doctor's slightly pissed off with the exposition now. He's like, yes, what else? What else do we have to get out of you before we get the plot going? But I actually think this is, even though it's pretty, straightforwardly done in terms of let's dump this information immediately, not organically have it as part of the story. It's like an opening chapter. It's like a prologue or a preface before the story proper, which is slightly cheeky, but it's done with 2 old sweats, but some good lines, and I think Cyril Luckham judges it well. That shot is incredible. What a way to herald the arrival of the beautiful Mary Tam in a stunning dress from a debuting costume designer, the fabulous June Hudson, who I think just makes everything look either elegant or operatic, and I think it's the right way to go. It does run the risk, perhaps. No, it doesn't. No, I think you need to embrace Doctor Who with both hands. I think when Doctor Who looks drab and has people talking about highfalutin things while dressed in beige, or that wonderful phrase squabbling rubber. But I think when it goes, well, let's really, embrace the largeness of this, the joy of this, the fun of this, never knowingly undersold, be it a performance or a costume. Now, doing large has to be well judged. I love Tom Baker. I don't think he always is reined in enough, and I think he is sometimes wayward. Now, you praise the you praise the money. What's the phrase? What I'm alluding to is you get an actor with this sort of presence, confidence, and eccentricity, and the rewards you get do sometimes come with some kickback. And I think that is, Tom will try anything, and it means we get some moments of absolute brilliance. But sometimes it means we get some moments that don't quite work. And would I rather have that than someone that never does the moments of greatness? Should life be like that? I think perhaps it should. Although I would say, that I think, Patrick Troughton is another mercurial actor. I don't think he has wayward moments in the way that Tom Baker does. And I think some of that's tied in with the length of time that Tom Baker plays the part and what we know about him. And I think, we know that he would test directors, he would test other actors. In fact, what I love about this Key to Time season is actually when I rediscovered it on DVD, and that gorgeous box that it came in. It was when it was quite a lot of money, and I remember, I bought the Key to Time season because it wasn't a season I knew brilliantly. I never had the VHSs. I borrowed the VHSs off a friend of mine, and he never actually got them back. He doesn't want them back now because technology has moved on. My friend Bernard, who played Tylos in Full Circle, I met this guy and he lived not far away. He was in Full Circle, and he lent me the Key to Time season. And that was really when I had seen it on bootleg, but that was when I watched it properly, which was quite late on. It was after I left university. So it took me a long time, I think, to learn to realise how great this story was, because watching it on a slightly sort of mucky VHS, I think, didn't help with its charms. I was slightly worried approaching this because I have the feeling that much of what I love about it is the things that people say to each other, and the very nature of this is that I have to talk through it, so there will be various brilliant lines that will, I'm sure, be missed. And it's the lines and the performances that I think I've always really enjoyed about this, which means I've had this waiting in the wings and have approached it with some trepidation, partially because Dan is a playwright who I will probably choose rich textural things that might not be as easy for me to pick up upon because of this process, which involves not shutting up, this is. They're slightly wobbly claws, the Shrievenzale. Dan said in his introduction, it's not a great monster story. It is about the characters. Unstoff and Garen are fantastic. But yes, what I was saying, when I rediscovered this on DVD, one of the great joys was listening to Tom Baker and Mary Tam on the commentaries, because they obviously got on. They obviously had great respect for each other. Mary Tam, because she has this Ice Maiden thing going on as Romana, and I think she's written as sort of aloof. I hadn't realised just what a laugh she was. And that really comes across in the DVD commentaries. And I've seen a few on-stage interviews with her since at conventions. And she's this stunning classical beauty, and I think she's from Eastern European stock, wasn't she? So she has that sort of stunning, slightly aristocratic looks about her. But I think she was also a Yorkshirewoman, wasn't she? And has a sort of blunt, game sense of humour. And I wish I had I wish I had got to know Mary Tam, because I think I'd have liked her a lot. And I actually think Mary Tam is perhaps slightly more interesting than Romana somehow is allowed to be. I'd be very interested to see how I react to Romana, because I remember when we wrote Running Through Corridors, neither Rob nor I had an awful lot to say about Romana 1. And I still haven't quite got to the bottom of that. Because obviously they have a great rapport. And it's interesting because the Doctor and Leela have a great dynamic, and it's no secret that Tom Baker and Louise Jameson didn't get on. But I do like the idea that apparently, Tom Baker was a bit, rude to Mary Tam, and she stood up to him and got his respect, and they discovered they shared a similar sense of humour. So there's a different sort of dynamic going on between Doctor and companion. And how do we feel? Interesting. How do we feel about the fact that somebody's come and said of our hero, actually, it didn't do that well in class, and I'm a bit cleverer than you. But the series has never been afraid to do that. It's never been afraid to show the flaws of it. So John Pertwee's vanity was, often front and centre, and often led to him having to cover up for his own folly. Patrick Trout and Zoe, there's no doubt that the Doctor is fiercely intelligent, but he's perhaps, too busy mucking about building his own time-space manipulator out of, fizz bombs, Godstoppers, and mud, and a Ford Fiesta, than he is to sit down and learn the proper science and do well in exams. And that appeals to me because I'm not a reader of instructions. I don't have the patience to do things properly, so I always get through by the skin of my teeth, and usually make things much more difficult than they need to be. So that element of the Doctor, I feel good about myself if I identify with the Doctor, because obviously the Doctor is a brilliant, charismatic, clever, and intelligent and heroic person. So if I have some traits that aren't necessarily good traits, that I can sort of go, but if the Doctor does that, they must be up to something. Now, I'm loving the design on this. I think the costumes are magnificent. I know a lot of them came from stock, but it doesn't matter. Making BBC drama is all about marshalling the resources at your disposal. And I believe this is cold, and I suspect it was really, really hot, because they're in a television studio. And it's obviously studio bound, but that's okay. I mean, the BBC Shakespeare's were obviously studio bound, and they were, illustrious high-end productions. This looks great. That's a fantastic set from Ken Ledsham. I love the snow. I just think the snow makes it feel a bit different. So I love the whole feel of Ribos. See, I think I like to think I know a bit about Doctor Who, but I've got a real brain fog when it comes to Time Lord. I always have to check how Time Lord is laid out. Is it Time Lord or is it Time Lord? And I know, but I forget, and then I lose confidence in myself. It's the same with Ribos and Ribos. Do you have any blind spots, listeners? Now I have put on my Patreon page on patreon.com/Toby Hadoke. I have asked some of those very generous people who keep me in gobstoppers and oxygen to send questions or observations about the stories coming up. I've only had 2 of them. Nathan Moore and Tim Dickinson have asked things and suggested things, so I might throw those in if I lose inspiration. How far ahead, asks Nathan Moore, he has a question, was the Key to Time idea planned in terms of this season, and to what extent was it mapped out? Well, I mean, it was planned far ahead. It was going to have this umbrella theme, and there was an edict on high to be less silly than the invasion of time, but I don't think they mapped out a story arc, and I think that's apparent in the way that the key to time is, apart from the sort of looking for the segments, which writers work in to a lesser and greater extent depending on how they wanted to serve the story, the actual, key to time plot is sort of basically two bookends with Valentine Down and Cyril Luckham at either end. That's not quite fair on the Armageddon factor, which I think at least does sort of tip the nod to go, no, we're getting to the end of the key to time thing now, and we need to up the ante. And Robert Holmes, I think, works the key to time into this rather nicely. Everybody's after the same thing, but it's of different value to different people, and some of its value is invented. I think that's all quite clever. Right, yes. So confession time. I love this story. This is not going to be difficult for me to eulogise. It might be difficult for me to describe to you because it's so rich in character and dialogue and performance. But this is the sort of thing the BBC does well. This is the sort of thing these kinds of actors do well. It's good acting. It is not necessarily acting you would find much of on television these days. I think that's understandable. A lot of this is more rooted in sort of stage tradition, but I love these performances. I mean, Paul Seed, I think, is such a big performance as the Graf Vindicay. By the way, the nomenclature as well, the Graf, nobody has a name like the Graf Vindicay, and it works. I think in the book he's the Graf Vindicar. I don't think Ian Martin could cope with it. I don't know. There's nobody with another name like that, but it works, and it doesn't seem silly, and and I was thinking about what's the difference. The Invasion of Time is funny. There are funny moments in the Invasion of Time. There are deliberately funny moments in the Invasion of Time. It's not as funny as this, and yet, because this is a different sort of humour, the humour is organic to it. The humour, I don't think, ever pushes itself too far. I think it's slightly smarter. I think it's more disciplined, and that's, yeah. And it's. I think when people get a bit carried away, and I think when people try to keep up with Tom Baker or try to ape Tom Baker and don't have what he has, and as I say, sometimes even he is wayward, but he's a wayward genius, and sometimes when you see non-geniuses trying to keep up with Tom Baker, it doesn't quite work. It's an ill-fitting outfit. I think everybody in this has the strength and presence of performance to match or complement what Tom Baker is doing. So it's a very consistent production. And she does that was very good because she's sort of deadpanning her way through his excesses, and I think that serves to ground everything a little bit. I mean, he's very shouty, but because he's a zealot, and he's, as we discover later on the Edge of Manners. I love Paul Seed. Paul Seed directed House of Cards, which was designed by Ken Ledsham. And again, that's what I love about the DVD of this, is that they interviewed a lot of the guest cast from this season, not just about their individual stories. There's a sort of overarching documentary that talks about working at the BBC at the time, because this was when strikes were happening at the BBC. Paul Seed became a hugely respected director and was recommended, I think, by Graham Williams, or certainly this production resulted in him moving behind the camera and directing some absolutely fantastic stuff. Never had the pleasure. He's one I'd very much like to have had the chance to speak with Paul Seed, because I love what he does in this, and I love his subsequent career. And he's got the hardest job, really, because everyone else is quite funny, and he's not really allowed to be, but he still needs to sort of match the largesse, and he certainly does that, but also be a credible threat, and he is certainly that. And there are actors who shout less than Paul Seed in Doctor Who, who somehow seem more over the top or less appropriately over the top, whereas I think he judges it very, very well. I worked with Dan Rebellato on a radio play, and it's, I have to say, the best radio scripts I've ever read, a production of Dead Souls for Radio 4. It was a straight offer for me, which was very nice, very unusual, and I got the cast list through, and it went Michael Palin, Mark Keep, Toby Hadoke. I thought, I'll take that. How has it got such a strong cast? And then I read the script, and it was fantastic. Every character brilliantly drawn. And I really liked Dan. But we didn't talk about Doctor Who because I didn't know he was a fan and he didn't know I was. It was only subsequently on Twitter when I think we followed each other because we'd got on when we'd done the show. But he'd been so busy supervising the production. One of us, I can't remember what the tweet was, but I know it was about the monster of Peladon. And I went, hang on, are you a doctor? And so it went on. Now, this is John Hamill, who, here's a piece of trivia, is very well endowed. There you go. You won't get that on any other podcast. How do you know that, Toby? Because John Hamill, you can find him on the internet. He was a bodybuilder and not a glamour model. I mean, it's quite a glamorous appendage that he has. And he did do some saucy movies, but he also did some pretty impressive movies and sort of semi-leading roles in sort of horror-y type movies in the 70s. He's in one with, is it called Trog, with Joan Crawford and Bernard Kay, my old mucker, which leads to Bernard Kay being played by somebody in Feud, the series about Joan Crawford and the Susan Sarandon, Jessica Lange one. I'm going off piece. Talk about that when we talk about Bernard in the story that he's in. But anyway, John Hamill had a sort of decent-ish film career, and any actor to be working in films in sort of featured parts is an achievement. But he also did saucy films, and he also did life modelling. And as I say, if you have a look, if you're that way inclined, have a look on the internet. You see quite a lot of John Hamill, and there's quite a lot of him. But yes, he was cast in this by George Spencer Foster, and he I think John Hamill said that his acting career went off the boil a bit because of those movies. Oh, I love the blood in the mouth of the Shrievenzale, which was actually, apart from the flappy claw, was, I think, Cyril Luckham gets top billing, of course. Why did he go? Oh, I knew that. But I want to acknowledge it because he's not in it again. That's his only appearance in Doctor Who. He gets top billing. John Hamill, there we are. I'm sure I could talk about him a bit later. So basically he plays a guard, but he's got quite an interesting history. I think he also eventually opened a furniture shop. John Hamill's wood is something that perhaps has many different connotations. Directed by George Spencer Foster, who's an interesting figure too, who I would sort of like to know more about. We think of him as somebody who died sort of before anybody interviewed, but I don't think he did. I think he died, after he could have been sort of tracked down and talked about Doctor Who, but I think he'd gone to Australia. Our feeling is that he went to Australia, maybe died in the early 90s, is what I think off the top of my head. Whereas I think we'd always had him as somebody who perhaps died in the early 80s, or he sort of fell off our radar in a way that other Doctor Who directors from that period didn't, and were tracked down in interviews, I think. And George Spencer Foster had worked on the Quatermass experiment. Why am I saying this when there's no moving pictures? So I need to see what Dan's favourite thing of part one was. What is mine? Well, this is going to be difficult because a lot of the great things are performances and characters that are in all 4 episodes. So I've got to choose when to play. Obviously, I can't play my Binro the Heretic card because he's not in this episode, and I would be flabbergasted if the Binro Unstoff scenes are not chosen by both Dan and I. I wonder if this is one where I could actually do well if I played my cards right. But I think for episode 1, will he choose Cyril Luckham and the Guardian of the Lights? But I did like that opening with the going dark and the blaring lights. Shall I choose that? Or do I choose Ribos itself with the snow and the cold and the furs and just that setting that I think is novel and it feels real and it's well rendered? Do I choose the opening with the light? I did like that light, watching it on this big screen here. It was really impressive, the organ music. Or do I choose, that's only going to be in this episode, and I could do the snow and the cold stone and the chill of Ribos later. What do I do? What's boy to do? What's boy to do? I'm gonna do, just because I always think of it as a bit of an underwhelming heralding to the key to time idea. You know, a man sitting in a chair. Brilliant though Cyril Luckham is, and witty though that exchange is. But actually I'd forgotten, they do actually start the whole season with a bit of a bang and an attempt to be grandiose with that darkness and then that blinding light, which I think is perhaps, yeah, it's perhaps giving it bigger welly than my general half remembered feelings were. So I'm going to say that's that powerful entrance of the Guardian. It's going to be interesting. I might have to play this one. What is Dan's favourite thing about episode 1?
The thing I love about episode 1, I hope this isn't too much of a cheat, because this is something that carries on the whole way through, but it's the world building. It's the way the story builds out a really rich sense of all the worlds that are going on in this adventure. First of all, there's Ribos. We find out a lot about Ribos. We find out about its geography. You know, the tundra, the ice time, the sun time, and then connected with that, of course, we find out quite a lot about its culture and its cosmology. There's a real, in fact, in terms of its culture, the big shout out, I think, for Dudley Simpson's score, particularly in this episode, the scene where they secure the strong room. I think that's what they're doing, and he creates that wonderful, slightly Eastern European feeling organ piece that's very, very memorable, very grand, very atmospheric, is wonderful. We sort of find out about the kind of politics and attitudes of the place. It's a really, really powerful evocation of a planet. And then, of course, we've got a second world, which is the world of the Grafin Decay. You know, the Cyrenic Empire, the Leviathan throne, the Alliance wars. We find out that you've got these lovely little hints of planets like Crestus Minor, and you know, the labyrinths on Freitas, and the Scar, I think, is mentioned, and so on. The whole idea of his brother usurping the throne is great. And then the third story is, of course, Garon's story, this intergalactic con man, which is kind of brilliantly done, and we get lovely little hints about his past. The fantastic line that Unstoff has about saying that he once said he was from a planet called Hackney Wick, which is a brilliant joke. It's brilliant the way the story sets up the whole world. And Deadly Assassin does it as well. I think that's another story where you kind of go, oh, actually, they've really thought through what this whole world is like. Keeper of Traken as well is another really, really good one. And this is one of those few stories where the world that the Doctor is entering is so well set up that actually, when the Doctor appears, I'm always really surprised. I go, oh yeah, of course, it's a Doctor Who story. The Leisure Hive does that as well in a funny way, but this is great. So episode 1, it's the world building that absolutely thrills me.
Okay, yeah, brilliant. I'm not going to stand a chance for this, because he's really thought about that, and he puts that so brilliantly. He's very clever, Dan. You can tell he's a smart, artistic person. He's the sort of person that you in fact, the last time I saw him, I didn't have a chance to speak to him because I was doing something. He was it was at the National Theatre tea rooms, and he was talking to Simon Williams. And I imagine Dan just wearing a scarf and bumping into Gore Vidal on the South Bank, being clever. So perhaps, yeah, bumping into Gore Vidal, or probably talking, because he's not a snob, he likes popular culture. Chatting to Gore Vidal about Rent-A-Ghosts. That's whilst wearing a scarf. That's what I imagine Dan's perfect life is like. Which is why I'm thrilled that he's doing this, and I love that contribution, because yes, he's absolutely right and nails the brilliance, I think, of Robert Holmes's writing and the economy with which he world builds, and it's a common thing in all of his scripts, and I probably won't tire of talking about it because of the way that he can build a world that we never see with a line, and it's very, very clever writing. That's also very easy on the ear, because the things he describes come to life because of his vocabulary and his use of language and character. Very good choice, better than a lighting effect and an entrance and a bit. I chose a bit. I chose a couple of seconds. He really thought about that. Well, there we are. Yes, interesting, but I thought I might struggle to speak during that. I'm still not hopeful I'm going to be able to fully be eloquent about the greatness of the Ribos Operation, but it is certainly a thing of greatness. I'm going to give it my best shot. So something will happen in episodes 2, 3, and 4. I'll make sure that I don't say nothing ever. Thanks for watching. Good night. Okay, yeah, brilliant. I'm not going to stand a chance for this, because he's really thought about that, and he puts that so brilliantly. He's very clever, Dan. You can tell he's a smart, artistic person. He's the sort of person that in fact, the last time I saw him, I didn't get a chance to speak to him because I was doing something. It was at the National Theatre tea rooms, and he was talking to Simon Williams. And I imagine Dan just wearing a scarf and bumping into Gore Vidal on the South Bank, being clever. Perhaps, yeah, bumping into Gore Vidal, or probably talking, because he's not a snob, he likes popular culture. Chatting to Gore Vidal about Rent-A-Ghosts. That's whilst wearing a scarf. That's what I imagine Dan's perfect life is like. Which is why I'm thrilled that he's doing this, and I love that contribution, because yes, he's absolutely right and nails the brilliance, I think, of Robert Holmes's writing and the economy with which he world builds, and it's a common thing in all of his scripts, and I probably won't tire of talking about it because of the way that he can build a world that we never see with a line, and it's very, very clever writing. That's also very easy on the ear, because the things he describes come to life because of his vocabulary and his use of language and character. Very good choice, better than a lighting effect and an entrance and a bit. I chose a bit. I chose a couple of seconds. He really thought about that. Well, there we are. Yes, interesting, but I thought I might struggle to speak during that. I'm still not hopeful I'm going to be able to fully be eloquent about the greatness of the Ribos Operation, but it is certainly a thing of greatness. I'm going to give it my best shot. So something will happen in episodes 2, 3, and 4. I'll make sure that I don't say nothing ever. Thanks for watching. Good night.